Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon, depending on where you are. Welcome. Just give everyone some time to filter in here. And as you are getting settled and joining the meeting, why don't you go ahead and find your chat bar and just let us know, how are you feeling today? What's one word or maybe a color that describes your mood? So if you are game, find your chat box and let us know, how are you doing today? See some familiar faces, or not faces, some familiar names filtering in here. Hi, Lisa, Lynn, Sophia, Stacy, Stephanie, Kate. Raven says green and yellow, feeling vibrant. Stephanie says her mood today is lime green. Feels like a fun color. Ooh, a lot of greens here. Lynn's mood today is pink. So welcome. We've got a few more people just joining us. We're going to give just one more minute for people to join our webinar. And if you are just joining us, go ahead and find the chat and send in a word or maybe a color to describe your mood. How are you feeling today? I haven't thought about this question personally, but I think I'm going to go with purple. I think I'm in a purple mood today. I don't exactly know what that means, but feels right. All right. Well, a few more people will probably filter in, but let's go ahead and get started. So welcome, everyone. You are joining today for the third webinar in the NEBO Company's webinar series, Leading a Culture of Belonging. Today's topic is Standing Up an Effective DEI Council. As a reminder, we have one final webinar left after today, and this webinar is really a culmination of all that we've been talking about in this series. So that is Leading a Culture of Belonging, and that will be on April 9th. So in just a moment, I'll send a link into the chat with all the details and information for how you can sign up for that final webinar. The link will also send you to recordings of our previous webinars if you missed those. So without further ado, I'm going to pass it over to one of our co-hosts today, Kate. Go ahead, Kate.
Thank you, Izzy. It's really appreciate those of you taking time to come and be part of our program. This topic is such a rich one for us, and we have so much to say about it. I'm looking forward to sharing. I wanted to say a couple words about the NEBO Company. For those of you who know us, you know that we're named after Lake Nebo, which is a hidden lake in the Adirondack Mountains. And it's really a metaphor for us, this idea of the way you feel when you're at the lake. Can you carry that with you into the busy world? And can you have a centered inner balance to the way that you approach life and leadership? So this philosophy inspires our work. And at times we go as a team to Lake Nebo and enjoy that too. So it's a real place, but it's also a great metaphor for us. We are celebrating our 20th anniversary this year, as I've mentioned before, and I'm really proud to share the 3 categories of service that we offer to our client organizations: strategic visioning and planning, leadership development, and organizational resiliency. And the topic of diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging really is part of a resilient organization. These organization development focused services are what we're featuring today. I'm Kate Ebner. I'm the founder of the NEBO Company, a leadership coach and a facilitator and instructor in leadership education. I am delighted to be here with my partner and colleague, Raven Rankin, who is our OD and DEI specialist within the NEBO Company and who has a deep affection for and commitment to the very topic that we're talking about today. Do you want to say good morning, Raven?
Yes, good morning. Thank you all for joining us today. We're excited to bring to today some of the findings that we've been finding through our work and some best practices, and hope that'll be really helpful for you as you think about establishing a DEI council within your own organization.
Thanks, Raven. Just a quick review. You may have attended our previous webinars, but there are a couple of webinars that really lay the foundation for today's work. And so the first, the one I want to refer to is webinar 2, where we actually shared the Spectra survey way of thinking about how to assess the stage of your organization. Is your organization at the avoid, comply, adopt, integrate, or transform stage? And our emphasis was really on how do you get to the transform stage, and what will it look like and be like when our organizations have arrived in that place. So we're going to be talking about the DEI Council today, and that's really a nice feature of an organization that's on this path to transform. Our takeaways today are 3. And we want to help you think about whether or not a DEI council is the right choice for your organization. We also want you to have some perspective about common challenges and pitfalls that come up when you're setting up a DEI council. And there are some really important ones to be aware of. We will hope that you take away guidelines and real examples that can move you forward in setting up your own DEI council. So we're going to try to bring this material to life and give you some guidelines to go on. When I think about how we start most of our topics, we like to give you at least a working definition. And so the topic is, what is a DEI council? Our definition here is that it's an advisory board that sits within an organization. It's comprised of individuals from different backgrounds and teams who guide action on the company's DEI agenda. DEI councils often function initially like a task force. And, a couple of other thoughts about the DEI Council. DEI councils are popular. They're considered to be a popular vehicle for helping to create organizational change, and particularly to ensure momentum around a DEI priority or initiative within an organization. Very often, they're a feature of a larger strategic diversity management plan. And they're a wonderful feature, and they are a great way to take an inclusive approach that allows people's voices to inform the kinds of changes and progresses that you're looking to make. Ultimately, DEI councils help operationalize DEI efforts in a day-to-day workings of an organization, whether it's looking at systemic work, like how we recruit, how we hire, how we onboard, how we develop, how we advance people within the organization, or it's looking even at the way we perform our services, the way we work with our customers or clients, the way that we create opportunity and develop our talent. So there's lots of systems impacts that a DEI council can have. Most DEI councils are in a position to recommend, to study and recommend, or to research and recommend. They aren't actually in charge of driving systemic change, but actually advising those who are. Here, we'd like to offer a little poll, and we want to know how many of you already have a DEI council. It could be that the answer is yes, you have one. Could be that you're in the process of forming one, or maybe thinking about it. Maybe you have not, and may not even be on the table, and that's okay. So let us take a moment here and see what from our participant group, what does it look like for us?
Great. And you are all very fast on this webinar. So most of you have clicked in your answer already. But if you haven't submitted an answer, give you just about 20 more seconds to do so. You should see a poll pop up on your screen. And so just about 10 more seconds or so. Let us know, do you have a DEI council? Are you in the process or considering forming one? Or do you not actively have one? Just about 5 more seconds.
So it's interesting as we look at this and we sort of take in what we're seeing, 70% of you already do, which is tremendous. And I think you may really want to help us with the chat as we have this session, chiming in and adding insights from your work. Another 13% are in the process of forming a council, and 9% are considering it. So this is well-timed webinar for those of you who are considering it. And then 2 out of 23 of you are not in this process yet. And so this is probably going to be a really helpful educational conversation. So we will continue on and give you some perspective. And I want to take the poll away. As we move forward here, the question that we are asking you is, should you? And I think this is a question that's a really interesting question to answer. Should you stand up a DEI council? And our answer at NEBO is, it depends. And so the sub-question we would ask is, what is the business case for doing so? What's the logic behind the desire for a DEI council? How will it advance your organization's mission? How will it support the results and the impact your organization wants to have? How will having a DEI council evolve your organization? And what's important to us as we pose the question is that you can go through the motions of setting up a DEI council and you can see it as a great step forward, but forward towards what, right? How does it connect in? What's the vision that you really have for your DEI council? And of course, being coaches, we like to offer you some questions to consider as you think about whether or not you should stand up a DEI council. So the first is specific to the council itself. What is the purpose or the mission of the DEI council? And for those of you, especially who already have one, it's interesting to think, can you articulate it in a really straightforward way? What does success look like for this council overall and in the first few years? And we would make a distinction between what it takes the first year or two to really stand up and get it moving versus what you hope it will do over time and how you see it as part of the larger organizational and business story. And then thirdly, how will the council interact with leadership and the rest of the organization? Once that council is active, how do people know what's happening? How does it communicate with the organization's leadership? How does it actually have influence? How does it invite others into the work? So these are some good questions to help you consider whether or not to stand up a DEI council. And by the way, if you don't know the answers to some of these questions, it doesn't mean you shouldn't stand up a DEI council. It just means you might have some preliminary work to really conceptualize what it is that you want to create and why. So there are some very good reasons to stand up a DEI council. And here are 8 of them. But what I do want to say about this slide is we don't want to give you like the cheat sheet. Here's 8 good reasons, so therefore we have to do it. But we do want to point out that there are some terrific reasons. All of these are good reasons. Prioritizing a diverse, equitable, and inclusive workplace, to encourage and learn from diverse voices. That's one of my favorites. To develop inclusive leaders who are actually council members who grow their skills and awareness and can be leaders of change in the workplace, modeling the way. To be part of advancing a larger DEIB strategy. So this is a component of it. To give input and advice to leadership, to develop and promote diversity initiatives, to research and share best practices for recruiting, hiring, promoting, and retaining diverse staff, and to review and give feedback on workplace policies. And so when you think about like, what is it that is the agenda of our DEI Council, you can see that there's quite a nice scope that they could be working in. And you might also recognize that right now, what we really want to do, for example, is have them help us develop and promote diversity initiatives that we've already outlined, or to give us a set of ideas about those diversity initiatives. So again, this might be a good tool for thinking about how and why you're setting up a DEI council. So you might also consider holding off on setting up a DEI council. And Raven and I have given this a lot of thought, I think, as we've worked with numerous clients, and also as we've thought about when is this potentially not yet the right move. And here are some reasons, right? Maybe your organization is very small and there's another approach you'd like to take to engage people, that standing up a council seems to separate the topics in the discussion when actually you're small enough to be having them organization-wide. Maybe you just are not ready. The mindset of your leaders is to localize responsibility. You're a little bit concerned that if we have a DEI council, everyone will say, oh, phew, somebody else is thinking about this. We don't have to. We don't need to. We'll let them do the work. If you feel like your organization is too early in the Spectra survey stages, you might decide to hold off until you've made progress in other places. You might not have the resources or the ability to commit resources. And I think one of the disappointments that some DEI councils have is when they're sort of put in motion, but then there's no resources or no available time to actually do this work. There's no backing. There's no budget. There's no way to actually do too much with it. And it feels in the end disappointing, right? So you might actually want to spend some time thinking about how you would define the resources, when you would be able to make them available, and what you would commit. And then the fourth one is a good one too. We don't have a clear picture of how the DEI Council will interact with our strategic priorities in the leadership team. Like, we know we want one. We know we even have ideas what we want it to do, but we haven't really thought through the processes of how it will work. We have a little bit more work to do here. And then we would also say that if you have a hunch or have done the Spectra survey and have determined that your organization's not yet, at least at the comply stage, it's too early. It won't be the right first move, and it probably won't be understood or well supported. So again, we want to look at the readiness. We're going to turn things over to you, Raven, for our next question. But I'm hoping, as I wrap this up, is that what we wanted to do here is to really introduce an intentional, thoughtful approach to thinking about what is it we want it to do? What's our vision for this council? How does it work in the system? And are we ready? And so, having said all that, I'm going to turn things over to Raven.
Yeah, thank you. I want to acknowledge Kristen's question in the chat. What is considered a small org, in your opinion, on why it's best off on establishing a DEI council? So, okay, any thoughts on that? And I'm happy to share my thoughts as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think these days organizations take many shapes and forms. So you could be a team, a company of 30 people spread out all over the world, right? And you decide that you want to localize the initiative by bringing more focus and bringing people from lots of different places together for conversation, and you call that a DEI council. So I would say that there's not a rule of thumb per se, but I would say that a company as small as the Nebo company, and our core team at Nebo is about 24 people, still feels a little small. We have a working group, but we think I would suggest maybe 50 or larger, and ideally, I would even say bigger than that, 100 or more. Raven, what do you think?
Yeah, I agree with that too, Kate. So thank you so much for sharing why an organization may or may not consider standing up a council. And so by no means is standing up a council a small feat, right? I'd like to take a moment to hear from you all about what are some challenges you faced when setting up a DEI council, or what challenges are you currently facing if you have one established already? And I think about 70% of you did have say that you have one. So love to hear from you all in the chat. Give you a moment. This really helps us get to understand what you all faced. Yeah, so we had capacity issues with the DEI working group. Yeah, hoping the council will take less of people's time, expectations of council members. They all come in with different knowledge, levels, goals, and hopes. How many are on the council, and who decides who joins the council? Yep, these are some of the challenges that we've seen many organizations face. And we're going to share some insights and to these challenges in a moment. All right, go give you a couple more seconds if you'd like to share. Challenges, setting up, getting everyone on the same page with shared language and understanding that everyone will start at different places. Yep. That one resonates. Right? People are on their different journey, on different stages of their journey. How to approach expanding to new members and meeting the organization where it's at. Excellent. Yeah, so let's move forward. So as I mentioned, standing up a council is no easy task. And I'd like to underscore, like, just because your organization is facing challenges when setting up one doesn't necessarily mean you should toss the idea away of having one. It may be that you're going through the hard motions that many organizations face. And so when standing up, it's natural for you to have more questions than answers. These are some frequent questions that organizations grapple with, from leaders thinking about how to fit it into their organizational structure and how to assess impact, to council members thinking at an individual level about their own role within the council and the support that they may need. So earlier, let's move forward. Kate talked about how to assess whether or not your organization is ready to establish a council. And if you feel that your organization meets that criteria to go forward, here's some frequent oversights to avoid. And for those who've already established councils, feel free to share in chat any of these that resonate with you. So the first being not clearly communicating the purpose of the council and publicly stating the organization's commitment. When implementing any new organizational change, clarity and transparency is key. The next is not creating the time and space for the council to come together and set their foundation. I'll go over this in a moment, but for now, I will say that organizational and culture change initiatives usually takes 2 to 3 years. So it's really important that organizations are accounting for this and not rushing the process or having unrealistic expectations and about instant success, right? And so I think, it's also important not to promise immediate outputs and outcomes. In this case, under promising and over delivering works perfectly. Because if you overpromise, it can really taint the reputation the council has and its overall success moving forward. This one is a no-brainer, and one that we can't stress enough, but having dedicated resources, people, time, and some finances. And then lastly, operating in a vacuum. A DEI council should be one component of your overall DEIB strategy, and therefore it's imperative that everything is connected and the DEI council is really in lockstep with the leadership team. So let's move forward. So this is the moment I'm sure you all been waiting for. How do you set your council up for success? Well, Nebo has identified 5 critical steps. The first one is the most critical and one that we can't stress enough, but ensuring organizational integration and leadership alignment. The second one is defining the council's purpose and responsibilities. Third, putting in place an intentional recruitment process. Fourth, really setting the foundation for a well-functioning council, from creating the space to providing training for council members. And then lastly, planning for ongoing support and prioritization. Setting up a council is not something that is a one-time ordeal. And so we're now going to just really dive deeper into these 5 steps. And so Kate, I'll turn it back over to you to talk about how to ensure organizational integration and leadership alignment.
Yeah, thank you, Raven. So I think there's 3 straightforward ways that I'd like to offer as we start down the path of thinking about this particular critical step. When we think about ensuring organizational integration, this has to do with really picturing when this council is working optimally. What does it look like? How is it talking to the rest of the organization? What channels is it using for communication? How is it meeting? How is it reporting back and being held accountable for its work? And who are the audiences for this? So how do we make sure that the council feels not only well supported, but also accountable, and that there are people really paying attention to not only the great progresses that they're making and the recommendations and advice that they're giving, but also some of the challenges that they're encountering. Gain buy-in and stated support from the top really means the senior most leadership level needs to express publicly support for this work and also gratitude and appreciation for the outputs, and to give a meaningful agenda to the DEI Council. So it should feel like a vitally important council that's actually contributing perspective, research, whatever it is you've asked of them, that advances the organizational priorities. And I would also look at how are you shining a light on their work? How are you publicly acknowledging the contribution? And then the third thing here is to agree upon a scope of focus, outputs, and communication channels. And this sounds straightforward, but it's actually one of the stumbling blocks that we see most often. It's sort of like, what is your agenda this year as a DEI council? What's the scope of your focus? And how does that connect to the larger focus of the organization? What are the outputs that we want to see from you, and when? And when will you bring them, and where will you bring them to? Hopefully the leadership team is one of them. And communication channels. How will we talk about what our work is doing? How will we apprise people of progress, etc. So when we think about effective DEI councils, and we think about what it looks like when they're really integrated and aligned with leadership, we see that support, as I've mentioned before, from the senior leadership team. And I think one thing that's really interesting is the locus of influence, right? So we've heard a lot of DEI council chairs saying, do we make decisions, or do we only make recommendations? Are we like what kind of support do they need? They probably need help getting really clear direction around what the senior leadership team would welcome from the DEI Council on a topic. And then also guidance around, we need a recommendation. We'd like you to do some research. We'd like you to give us a written feedback on a policy, just be super clear. That clarity is part of support. Linking directly to the overall business strategy. So it shouldn't be like your DEI strategy sits over here, and then your organization and business strategy sits over here, right? It actually should be woven through your entire organizational and business strategy with a strong link to the work of the DEI councils. The DEI council should be an extension in some ways of that strategy. Diverse membership is critically important, and really thinking about the dimensions of diversity that are particularly crucial to your organization. Metrics to track progress. So how will we know we're succeeding? And glad to talk more about some ideas there. Would love to see some things in the chat about how you're assessing metrics of success and progress for your DEI council. Really, I've talked already about goals and outcomes. And I think, the best DEI council setup is when the DEI council sees itself as having an annual set of priorities that contribute to a larger organization-wide set of strategies. So this year, our focus is this, it's moving the dial. Next year, we'll take it to the next stage, right? Versus continuously trying to work on everything all at once without that clear sense of prioritization. When we think about how to gain alignment and support from the top, these questions that I've already said them a couple of times, but I think they're really important to talk about. And we've facilitated a few different leadership team conversations about how does the leadership team see the DEI Council, and how is the DEI Council going to be communicating and interacting with the organization? Can it have a newsletter, for example? Can it call a meeting of the organization? Can it offer a series? Does it need approval? What does the leadership team want to know about it? And what are the areas of agency that the DEI Council really has? And I think in the best of all worlds, there's a no surprises approach, right? Where the leadership team is fully aware of what the DEI Council is working on, strongly in support of it, asking really good, interesting, probing questions, and also offering a lot of encouragement and support, and then really showing up at the types of things that the DEI Council might be hosting in the organization. So when we think about leadership alignment, here's a couple of questions again to give you some food for thought. Who's going to be the liaison with the council from that executive team? Should that person attend the council meetings or be more in the wings? Maybe they come to the onboarding or the kickoff, but they work more directly with the council chairs. How often does the leadership team want to hear from the council? Quarterly, every 6 months? Probably we would recommend at least that. What will the process be for demonstrating achievement and accountability? How will we tell people about the great achievement of the DEI Council? And who's interested? Do you want to report to the board on it? Do you want to put something out at the end of the year when you think about how you do sort of reflection on the year as an organization? Make sure that there's a visibility to the work of the DEI Council. And then I think, what does the exec team want to know about the DEI Council's work? And I hope that executive teams everywhere are deeply curious about this work and very grateful to those who are doing it. I think that that it's really an interesting thing to stand up a DEI Council. To be a strong council member requires a commitment to your own professional growth and personal growth. And so the work isn't just tasks, achieving tasks. It's also the work of becoming an example of a really well-functioning and diverse team. And so when an executive team invites people to this opportunity, learning about what it's like to be on that council and what it's like to work on these topics and what kinds of discussions they're having, that curiosity and genuine interest really goes a long way.
Yeah, and it's just something to add to that point, Kate. I think, it's really important that the success of the council is the role of each leader's role. And good exercises to really thinking about how does each leader interact with the DEI Council, and having that conversation to ensure that there's alignment and that it's top of mind for each leader.
Yeah, you may have a liaison who's like their go-to person, but it should be perceived as the work of the entire leadership team.
Yeah, exactly. So next up, we're going to talk about defining an intentional recruitment process. And this includes outlining how to recruit and assess candidates, as well as the expectations of members. So as we continue on, here are some questions that the leadership team or council sponsor should outline at the very outset. So on top of thinking about how frequently will the council meet, thinking about what is their time commitment outside of the meeting time. This includes sending out communication, researching, attending DEIB social events, conferences to learn more and increase their own knowledge, and so forth. I would say in the best case scenario, the organization will dedicate a portion of each person's time to participating on the council. And so if you expect it's about 3 hours a month, the organization should be creating the space for that, and their supervisor should be aware. Then thinking about what is the training that all council members are expected to have. We always recommend that at the bare minimum, a common language training so that people are speaking the same language and have that DEIB foundation. And so required training may vary for each organization depending on what the DEIB curriculum is for staff. And we'll go into this a little bit more later. And the last one ties back to the purpose and responsibilities of the council. So thinking about what exactly will they discuss when they meet and getting pretty granular on that. If we go on, when it comes to the recruitment process, you have a few options, right? Whether it's having members elected onto the council, nominated by others, having an application process, or even doing a hybrid approach. The most important is to make sure that this is the right process for your organization and that it's equitable and inclusive. So a good way to think about what is right for your organization is to consider, what is the current climate? Is there high levels of trust in psychological safety? Do you anticipate that you'll have a hard time recruiting quality candidates? An application process is usually an excellent way to ensure that the process is inclusive and equitable. And so if you do choose that route, you may consider, coupling with the written application with interviews. And this could be probably if you suspect that, you may not be able to see a candidate's strength shine through on the written application, or if you have, additional questions about something that is on their application. And what I would say about that is that if you do decide to interview a candidate, there should be consistency in the criteria of how you're selecting which candidates to interview. And so good best practice is if you're going to interview one, you might as well interview all, or at least candidates that fall within a certain rating. And when you think about a good size for the council, we always recommend that a good number is 8 to 12 members. If your organization is larger than 150, you may consider 15 to 20, but we would definitely not suggest any more than that. As we go on, some guidelines when creating a written application is that it should be brief yet thoughtful. You don't want an application to deter potentially excellent candidates from applying. So here are some sample questions that we've provided. So why would you like to be a part of the DEI Council? This allows you to see their passion and reason for applying. How do you see yourself contributing to building a diverse, equitable, and inclusive culture for your organization? This is to see what ideas they may have. What experience do you have working with issues of equity inclusion? This helps showcase their commitment. And then how do you practice the core principles of equity and inclusion in your life? And these examples can be either from a professional or a personal context. So I know a lot, so feel free to type any questions that you have in chat. Should those 18 include a HR representative? We do recommend having a HR representative on the council, yes. So when you're assessing the candidates, a best practice is to have them reviewed by a diverse selection committee and to utilize a rubric to ensure that this process is equitable, right? So here's some ways you can assess: the track record of commitment of responsibilities, interpersonal effectiveness, how well do they really work with others, knowledge about DEI. I will say for this one, it's not an end all be all, but there should be a willingness to increase their knowledge. Experience working to advance DEI. So once again, not an end all be all, but it is good to have a mix of people on the council that have experience in this. And then distinctive ideas and point of view. And this can range from things like their religion background, job level, whether they're an internal or external facing role, and so forth. And then enthusiasm and passion for the DEI Council's mission. This is important because you want people who are passionate about the DEI Council's stated purpose and not those who have their own agendas, right? And then strong support and recommendation from their supervisor. Just a side note here, candidates should be in good standing to participate from an HR standpoint. And that is something that you should acknowledge up front and should be stated in the application process, just so that they're not wasting any time and that there's clear expectation up front. So I know we just went through a lot. Any questions? Should one or more? I would say the one. You don't want to have it be overwhelmed with too many HR representatives. All right. Thank you, Stacy. I'm sure this varies heavily by organ support, but what's an average or recommended timeline to consider from mapping out to standing up a DEI council? My industry moves fast, but can leave gaps when we don't take the time. I will say that definitely want up to 1 year. And I'm going to go over this a little bit more, Chelsea, so give me a moment to fully answer that question. All right, so next up is setting the foundation. So creating a charter, establishing a governance structure, and equipping members with the proper skill set. So you can anticipate that this setup alone can take the first 6 to 12 months when standing up your council. So being patient with this process is critical. And I think you get the idea here. Patience is a virtue when setting up a DEI council. So the charter will include these following components, and this will be up to the council to create, right? So they should expect to allocate about 3 to 4 hours upfront to develop this charter. So the first being the purpose and mission, which will already most likely be determined by the leadership team, the council norms, how are meetings conducted, the expectations of members, the process for making decisions, whether it's by consensus, majority vote. This is important because it can really cause breakdown within a council when the process is not clearly defined. We've seen it happen countless times where when there isn't a process for making decisions, each member will have their own perspective on when a decision was made, what the decision even was. And so you can even have people just going forward thinking that the decision was made and everyone was in alignment when there wasn't really any alignment at all. People were probably just being silent, or, it was just really unclear. Or another scenario is that nothing will move forward because decisions aren't being made. So it's really an important and critical part of the charter. When you think about two roles that are very helpful when setting up a council for success are the chair and secretary positions. And so depending on the council's purpose, you may consider having others, but it is really important to have a leader, whether or not it's rotating, and someone to take meeting minutes to ensure that commitments are being tracked and followed through and that the meetings are actually getting scheduled. The communication strategy outlines how the council will communicate with the rest of the organization and other groups, such as the marketing team and so forth. And so most councils are led by a chair or co-chairs that are elected for 1 to 2 year terms. And so as you start your first council, it is good to see establishing council leaders as a win. Just see that as a win. There will be very small ones during the first year. So if you're like, we have council leaders, that is a win. And then it's important to think through the process for inviting and considering and selecting chairs. And just to ensure that, this process is fair and transparent, usually a voting process works well here. Another thing to think about is how will the DEI Council's chairs interact with the leadership team? And Kate talked a little bit about this earlier, but for example, they may meet with them bi-monthly or send monthly updates or have a meeting, a reoccurring meeting with the leadership team liaison. And then lastly, as we move on, it's imperative to equip members with the necessary skill sets to thrive on the council. We recommend an annual kickoff and orientation to the DEI Council for all members. And if you find that your organization is more advanced when it comes to DEIB fluency, you may consider surveying members to see what they feel they need to be successful in their role and kind of developing the training towards that. And so, like I said before, equipping members with the common language is necessary. Other topics may include building the capacity for dialogue, fostering and practicing psychological safety, being able to see systemic and structural racism, helping them acquire the tools to engage and facilitate in difficult conversations, and understanding and navigating power dynamics. This one is very helpful, especially if there are members with reporting relationships on the council. And so when you have new members, they may also benefit from an onboarding process that includes a discussion with the council chairs about the previous work, current priorities, what to expect, and then how to participate on the council.
Yeah, and I would like to just add that you may also want to invest in some professional development for your chairs, because they are bringing all of their strengths and gifts. They're also learning how to lead a council like this, and they're learning how to be a partnership together in that work. And so there's some sort of forming and storming and norming that they need, as well as the creation of a clear sense of how to work effectively together. What we sometimes see, especially when there's time pressure and not enough time in the day to do the things that the co-chairs need to do, we'll sometimes see that people will default. So I'm the person who gets things done, so I'll just quickly start acting and getting things done. I may or may not remember to communicate with you, or I'm the person who convenes the meeting. I'm going to be like the main convener, but wait, we didn't confirm that. So it's very helpful to think in terms of how to equip the members, but also how to equip the chairs to be a successful partnership together. If you have, particularly if you have co-chairs, if you have a single chair, that individual may need a closer liaison with the leadership team or somebody else who's really helping them support and process this work.
So we have quite a few questions in chat that I'm going to acknowledge right now. So Kate's question is, are you going to talk about how to reward or recognize the council money or not? So not really, we're not focusing on that today in this webinar, but what I would say is like, do something that is a right fit for your organization. And I would, if the bare minimum is rewarding them in the what is that, the performance review process. So being able to say they're, highlighting their involvement in the DEI Council and really making that count. Kate, I'm curious to see if you have any other ideas about how to reward or recognize the council members.
I mean, I love your thought about making sure it's acknowledged in the performance review as a contribution to the organization, a leadership contribution to the organization. I think that this participation is a real professional development opportunity for people on the council, particularly if the council is a place where they're learning and growing while learning how to think about the organizational system and its needs. Like this is just huge opportunity for elevating your gaze from your usual day-to-day and learning how to think across the system and think about policy and meet and interact with people who you might not otherwise have spent as much time with. So I think that emphasizing the professional development piece and making sure that that's real for people, and maybe having that be part of your kickoff, sort of like, what would you like to contribute? What would you like to learn? Just really working that learning element into it. And then I would also say that recognition, being publicly appreciated, having the council's names shared, that people aren't just working in a invisibility, but there's a sense of appreciation and that it's a big deal to do this. There could be a small gift, there could be a small gift certificate or something like that. But I think the most important things are equipping people, supporting them, featuring them, and emphasizing their leadership and the learning that's happening.
Yeah, I've seen many organizations post their DEI Council members on their website, and that's just like a good feeling and a great way to recognize their contribution as leaders in the org in this capacity. And then Chelsea has another question. Are these things that should be outlined before recruitment or with new members of a council? It seems like some of these structures, it seems like some of this structure may need to be outlined prior to recruitment, perhaps. And I'm guessing you're talking about the charter. What I will say about that is, thank you, Chelsea, for the clarification. What I will say about that is, I think up at the beginning, when you're having the organizational alignment and the leadership alignment, you may want to develop some of these things up front. But then you might say, let's leave it to the charter to determine how they're going to make decisions, how they are going to communicate with the organization, just to give them a little bit more autonomy and really figure out how they'd like to work together. So it really also depends on your organization structure and what your expectations are.
Yeah, I mean, this is part of why that first year is so foundational, is because if you decide to invite your council to establish its own norms, that's a process. They're learning actually how to work together, how to agree to something, how to make a plan, how to follow the plan, right? That exercise is a significant learning for them about how to be a council. If the council's been in place for a couple of years and all that's been worked out, people will join the council and learn how it works, and you won't have to do that foundational work. But I think you definitely don't want to invite people to be the council and then say, okay, your job is to tell us what the council should be and tell us what you want and what you want to do. Like, that would be too loosey-goosey, I guess. It would put a lot of pressure on the council to figure out some of the things that a well-organized effort wouldn't ask of them, right? So you do want to have a clear mission for the group, a vision of success, some of those things we pointed out earlier in this conversation. And I think every year is different, and you're going to learn as you go, and your needs of the council are going to evolve as well. So that's important to tune into.
Yeah. And so just to go back to your question, Chelsea, about what is the typical timeline for standing up a council, we would say definitely 1 to 2 years. And then if you do find yourself, like you mentioned, in a rapidly changing environment, you can shorten that to 6 months, but there is going to require a lot more meeting time upfront.
Yeah.
For that.
And what I would say is if you have stakeholders who want to see results fast, you might say, okay, the first year, here are the 6 mile markers that we are going to achieve. We're going to form the council. We're going to establish a methodology for application process or for selecting council members. We're going to have an orientation of that council. We're going to set up a co-chair, and we're going to engage in a discussion of the work of the council and how it connects to the organization's strategic agenda, right? All of those things are part of standing up your council in year 1. They're really significant things to do. And you might have thought you could jump immediately into a policy discussion, but you actually want to define success differently. You want to focus more on the foundational pieces and then turn the page year 2. Now let's really look at that agenda we've got for year 2 that the council's working on. Let's practice our communication channels and our accountability channels and our meeting structures, and let's keep working on that. So it's just really good to acknowledge that success requires a good foundation.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you, Kate. And emphasis on that organizational change usually takes 2 to 3 years, and you want to do it right rather than go fast. All right. So the last up is planning for ongoing support and prioritization. So really committing for the long run. Members will come and go, priorities will change. Therefore, ongoing support is critical. You'll probably need to get new members up to speed. You will need to keep all members up to date on recent happenings in the ever-evolving DEI landscape. So having a budget line item for this will really also help set your council up for success. And there's other ways to provide that support as well. And so I'm going to turn it over to Kate to further express the importance of this.
Yeah, so I think we say it as simply as we can, but I think organizations with a systemic approach that more toward that transform side of the spectra scale, think of their DEI Council as an ongoing organizational feature, not as a short-term fix. And they think of this council as an evolving entity that's actually growing in its own capability and maturity over time. And it's a real opportunity for the organization to learn from itself and to develop individuals who can really be change agents and who can help influence the future. So it's not something that you stand it up and then you can turn around and do something else. It's something that you need to think of as a continuous investment, and that's going to really do phenomenal work with the right amount of nurture and attention and support. And I think we wanted to kind of end with this note of grace, really, which is to accept the hiccups, right? This is complex work. Things come up. We scratch our heads sometimes at things we thought were going to be straightforward that then become complex. Standing up a new DEI council is a process that can take 2 to 3 years, as Raven has said, before they're really functioning routinely and having the desired impact. One of the things I think about when I'm working with organizations standing up a DEI council is the quality of leadership, both at the leadership team level and at the DEI council chair level, make all the difference, right? So it's really, there's all this stuff we've been talking about, the charter and the structures and so on, but we need real leadership inside the organization to make this work. And so one of the things we want to point out is that a DEI council is a form of a team, and that every team needs time to form, storm, that's inevitable, norm, develop its norms and its ways of operating together, and then perform, and then eventually adjourn, or perhaps not adjourn, perhaps revitalize and recontract and form again. We also know that every time a new team member joins a team, we're back at forming, right? So thinking about how you onboard your DEI council members and how you create smooth transitions is a really important part of this. So we've given you a lot to think about. We're really energized by this topic. And I think our message to you as we kind of come to an end of our hour is remember to make sure you're giving the council members the space and the time to work on this important work. And make sure you're connecting the dots between leadership, system, council, strategy, community. Do provide council support training for co-chairs or chairs, and be ready to work together, to roll up your sleeves, to really support them in their success. We really think that a great DEI council, it could be one of the most profound and important career experiences that leaders can have, and can really change their understanding of the system, even as they help the system understand people better.
Yeah. And I'd just like to add there, don't underestimate the power of coaching. And through this process, I think what's something that our clients really appreciate with working with us is being able to have like a thought partner, and to say like, okay, this is totally normal. You're experiencing the emotions of going through a council, and then providing coaching for the council members and the chairs throughout the process, and allowing them to know that that resource is there for them. But yeah, any other questions before we close out today? It was great being with you all. Thank you for the excellent questions that you've posted in chat. And we're here to support you in any way possible that you need.
Thank you, Stacey. And as we think about what we're sharing, I'm hoping that even those of you who have really great efforts underway, standing up or running councils, finding something here that you can bring some attention and some care to. This is really important work, and we really, we don't underestimate the power of a great council to make a difference. We also know that it takes the whole system in support of that council to really have the impact. So thank you all very much for joining us today. And we'll see you one more time. April 9th, Leading a Culture of Belonging is our summation of this series. And I think this is really about the cultural piece and about what it's like to build and lead an organization where belonging is a word people would use to define the culture. So we're looking forward to that conversation, and looking forward to, we're going to be opening up that conversation to hear more from you. So please join us on April 9th.
All right, Kate and Raven, it doesn't look like there are any more questions. So thank you so much for another great session, and everyone have a wonderful rest of your day. You'll receive the recording and the slide deck this afternoon. We'll see you next time.
Thank you.